Shalom,
I have a
Michelle Gold
mosquito on
here.
my wall. I
Last
feel like,
time in part one of this interview.
yes. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, what got you interested in music?
My mother was singing from the day I was born. As I was being born, she sang Michelle My Belle by the Beatles. My parents, from as early as I can remember, I was a walking trained monkey or trained jukebox. My parents would just plop me on any counter at the bank or any counter at a fair or at the store, and they would just say, sing, without even putting a quarter in. And it was like, okay. It wasn't even a question. It was just sing. It was a command. And I had songs in my pocket that I would just take out. So that's what made me want to do music. That very moment of receiving so much good feedback from people, how music can be like therapy.
So, how has your faith transformed your life?
Well, my faith has been transformed first in the 12-step program, because in the 12-step program, the group therapy, we learned a lot about how to cope with anxiety. And I spent a lot of my life with massive anxiety. I had irritable bowel syndrome. It was so bad that I'd be on a date or out with friends and I would disappear and I'd have massive cramping and be stuck in a bathroom for like 45 minutes. That's how bad my anxiety was. But learning about anxiety and how a higher power, even before I knew Jesus, learning that a higher power could heal my anxiety, that I could live in the moment and trust him for my future. And of course, the 12-step program was originally based on the Bible. On that, and this particular teaching is based on when Jesus said, live for today. You can't live for tomorrow. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. And so my faith transformed me in that I became a less anxious person. Definitely still hyper, but less anxious. I can't think of any other ways it's transformed me except the whole healing thing, that I felt at one time ashamed of my body. I felt ashamed and I would wear old baggy clothes. I was ashamed of being pretty or being beautiful. Um, I didn't want to cause anybody to fall. And I went to the extreme measures and dressed in baggy clothes. I was afraid of who I was. I was ashamed of my past. So my faith transformed me in that I now had no more guilt and shame. I could live with that freedom that the past is the past. Like the song Frozen says, the past is in the past, or whatever that song, let it go. So yeah, freedom from anxiety and freedom from guilt and shame was a big transformation, probably the biggest transformation. And of course, the first thing I mentioned earlier, it transformed me in that my hope was no longer in things that are movable. You know, if I lost my voice, my faith made me say, okay, I'm going to be happy, even if I'm hoarse. I'm not saying it was perfect. I still at times would call my friend Lisa and say, Lisa, I need prayer because I'm about to make my voice my happiness and I'm hoarse right now. But at least I could reach out to Lisa and we could pray, Lord, help me not base my happiness on my voice right now, or help me not base my happiness on the fact that I'm not famous right now, or help me not base my happiness on the fact that I don't have any friends right now. Everybody rejected me. So yeah, I think those three top things, those are the three biggies, I think.
Okay, so about that, your faith, we're probably going to get a little bit more specific, a little bit. Okay, so for you, that you said that you grew up in a house where there really wasn't much spirituality or religion, so to speak. So, how were your parents brought up then, from what you know?
My mother was brought up that anything goes and that you can create your own destiny. She believed that when you died, you went to dust. She believed that God existed, that he was my creator, but that maybe he was too busy and he wasn't going to stick around to hang out with me and be my friend and hear my prayers. So God was more of just a creator to my mom. My mother sometimes thought that nature was God, and she talked to me about worshiping nature and just loving nature. So she was a little confused. She made her own God. And I think for her, music was God, which is kind of good and kind of very bad, very, very bad. I mean, to a Christian, that would be bad. If you told somebody who wasn't a Christian that, they'd probably praise her. Oh, good music, lifted you up. My father was religious before he met my mom. He used to light the candles. And then after he met my mom, he decided that God was very, very far away and he didn't have to be religious because my mother wasn't religious, and he tossed it away to the wind. He also began to doubt God because of the Holocaust. He didn't understand suffering, and but yet he wanted me to be Jewish, and he wanted me to go to temple on the holidays. So yeah, it was more of just a culture. Jewish culture was more important than spirituality to my dad. So in essence, there was no spirituality with both parents. No, if there was a God, he wasn't here right now to help me.
Yeah, so for you, was it more reform or was it secular or both?
I would say both. Yeah, more secular, but also reform, because they would encourage me to go to temple on the holidays. And they did put me through Hebrew school. Unfortunately, Hebrew school did not talk about God. I used to beg them to talk about God. They would talk about Hebrew and Jewish holidays.
So for you, was there any like connections that you felt whatsoever to the scriptures or to the Old Testament, or was there like no connection at all?
They didn't allow me to read the Old Testament because they told me unless I read Hebrew, I'm not allowed to read it, because they felt that English was not accurate, which is really sad, because that's not true. But they taught me that. So I never knew about the English version until I turned 15. And my cousin told me about it because he was a secret believer. So I did feel God though when I was 8 years old. I had an encounter with God at 8 years old in my room where he said to me, Michelle, you can't die. I have a plan for your life. You're going to sing and your songs are going to bring healing to the world. So at 8 years old, I felt like I saw God. I heard him. I heard his voice. And then I kept looking for him at my temple and I didn't find him. I went to Hebrew school looking for him, but they didn't talk about him. Even when they talked about Passover, it wasn't about God rescuing us. It was about lighting the candles. It was about eating the matzah. And they just didn't talk God. I don't know why. No personal God. I also felt God, though, because somebody in my life must have been secretly signing me up for a mailing list where I was receiving the Bread of Life devotionals. It was a little paper packet like the size of this, as a little booklet that they would send to your house, and it had a devotional every day. I would read it and I would replace Jesus with God. Just in case Jesus wasn't the Messiah, I would say God. So yeah, those are the two times I really felt like God existed.
So you said that you were 15, that you had, had met your cousin who was a secret believer.
Yes.
So, like, how did that, like, change your perspective on what you have been brought up in? What happened?
So I went to Florida to record a record with my cousin Steven. He said he's a producer, and I thought I was going to be the next Madonna, or modern day Lady Gaga. And I went to Florida to record. We took a break and we walked along the beach. He was on fire for God in his life, on fire. He loved God so much. And we went for walks on the beach. And he said, do you know God could be the father you never had? And he could fill that void in your heart. And I just thought that was wonderful. It was exactly what I needed. I had never heard in my whole life that God could be my father. Isn't that strange? Like that, you would think everybody would know that. So he said, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, and all the first believers were Jewish. It's the most Jewish thing you could do. And I said, well, then why don't the rabbis tell us to believe in Jesus? And he said, I don't know. So I received Jesus on Miami Beach. Went home, got the Bible with the red letters where Jesus talked, and snuck to church for maybe a year or so before my pastor outed me without my full permission. He outed me to my parents without a really good plan in place. And it backfired because they locked me in my room. I wasn't allowed to go to church. So I fell away from God for 3 years. I was so confused. And then 3 years later, I came back to the Lord. I was looking for him everywhere. I didn't understand how to find a church, right? So I would go to all these different types of churches. I would go to the Catholic Church, and I didn't understand, why can't I feel God here? Why can't I feel Jesus? They're talking about Jesus, but I didn't feel anything there. I didn't sense his presence. Isn't that strange? And then I went to a Baha'i faith where they believed everybody's God. And I was into that for a little while. That sounded good, sounded right. But then I finally realized Jesus said, I am the only way. I'm the truth and the life. So I realized that the Baha'i religion was not the right one, even though it seemed nice. So, so at 19, I got on fire for God. I found a good church where they explained the Jewish roots of my faith. And then I soon met my husband. And so that's how I found that's how I found God.
So how has your faith, how has it impacted others around you?
Well, I have to admit, part of me is still like a tiny bit damaged in that I don't celebrate myself enough. I don't celebrate my accomplishments. I'm a perfectionist. I don't ever look and ask myself, how have I impacted people? I think one time I did that, and it was because I was writing a book and I had to write that, or I was on TV and they wanted to know in what ways I made an impact when I was on the Sid Roth show. So I had to dig it up. I had to ask my husband, because my husband would keep count of how many souls got saved every time I sang. He had a list. And do you know, now I'm 45 years old. I started ministering with him in my 30s. And till this day, I have not memorized that number, but I believe it's in the thousands of people who together, between Joe and I, between me singing and Joe preaching, and also other singers who came alongside me with Jews for Jesus, not just me alone, but a piano player, a guitar player, another singer. I think we might have, won thousands of souls for the Lord, touring with Jews for Jesus. But like I said, must be something in me that doesn't really want to look at that and celebrate that. I don't keep track of it, which is probably, if I did, I probably would feel more fulfilled, and I would know that I'm making a difference. These days, I'm getting very stupidly caught up in looking at YouTube views, which is a huge mistake. And it's a blemish on my faith, because Jesus doesn't care about YouTube views. He's not looking and saying, how many people are watching your videos? So I think also, Jessica, my faith has impacted people through my album, Who Will Go? Because we gave out the album in Israel. We gave it to Holocaust survivors. I had one Holocaust survivor that actually wrote me a letter thanking me. There's this other elderly lady who emailed me once that she was depressed, and listening to my music, she started dancing in her living room and finding joy, deliverance from depression. And I tell you, I don't hear enough stories. I used to save emails when people wrote me emails. But I'm really glad you asked me this question, because it's making me realize I need to start looking at that. So I could keep wanting to do what I'm doing, so that I don't give up and feel fruitless, So I'm really glad you asked me that, and I'll look into it more. I'm sure if I think hard enough, I could think of people we impacted. I know our Bible studies really impacted people we used to meet in our homes. And with that, you can see your fruit right away. You can see people. There was this girl who was pregnant and barefoot. She started to learn how to drive. She went back to work. God healed her of worthlessness, and she became a better mom from being mentored by Joe and me. So I had a little part in that. I know there was a couple of girls who were molested in Denmark and in Brooklyn, New York, that I kind of talked with and mentored, and they told me they felt, delivered in some way. So when I get to heaven, I look forward to seeing, who I impacted. And I have to tell you a secret that I've been secretly hoping that all the singers who have surpassed me now in Messianic Judaism, I've been secretly hoping that I've inspired them in some way. So when I get to heaven, I can get credit for making a difference. Isn't that funny?
Hey, Michelle Gold here. Thank you so much for listening to this interview so far and sharing these intimate moments with us. Hope you'll stick around and listen to part 3 coming right up. Shalom, shalom.